again, I sometimes think it's good to just look at maybe just one example just to sort of clarify what I mean there. So if someone's applying to Cambridge to study land economy, that would be a sort of classic example of this. They won't be applying to study land economy at the other universities on the UCAS application, because you can't study it at other universities. So it's highly likely they'll be studying things like, or applying to study things like economics, or possibly geography, or possibly law at other universities, and that's fine. So their UCAS personal statement should be focused on the subject that they're applying for at the majority of the universities. So it might be economics, might be law, might be geography. That's how they should handle the UCAS personal statement. Having done that, when they complete the MyCambridge application form, in the personal statement for that's when they can talk about land economy, and that's what they can tell us. They can tell us more about why that course appeals to them.
Hi everyone, and welcome to. I'm going to do that again. I don't know.
Going well.
It's going well.
Going well.
As I started, I realised I've never said hi everyone. So
that's fine. Keep that in there. That's your little bit at the start. That's your Easter egg thing.
That's my Easter egg thing.
Yeah.
No.
I'll edit it
in. Maybe, probably not. Hey everyone, welcome to Cambridge from the Inside. We're here with a returning guest today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Marcus Tomalin. I'm the Director of Admissions here at Trinity Hall.
Nice. And today we're going to be talking about the MyCambridge application, what it is, how it's a crucial part of the application process if you're applying to Cambridge, how it's different to the personal statement but similar. And so for anyone who doesn't know, Marcus, what is the MyCambridge application, or the MyCapp?
Yeah, so the thing that we call MyCambridge application, or MyCapp for short, it's basically an additional form that everyone who applies to Cambridge has to fill in. So it's obligatory to fill it in. It's an online form that just really enables us to gather some additional information. We can talk about some of that in a bit more detail perhaps in a second, but basically these are pieces of information that we can't get just through the UCAS application. So it doesn't just repeat all the stuff that people have filled in on the UCAS application. It requires them to give us further information, some of which is very, very useful for us while we're assessing their application.
Nice. So when is the MyCapp deadline, and is it different to the UCAS deadline for Cambridge?
Yeah, it's usually a week after the UCAS deadline. So people submit their UCAS deadline, the UCAS application by the deadline, which is usually October the 15th. Yeah. And then they have to complete the MyCapp form and submit it a week later, so within 7 days of submitting their UCAS application.
And just to be clear for anyone who's watching, what happens if you were to miss that deadline?
So if you miss the deadline, basically we have to reject your application. Okay. So we consider your application to be incomplete, and therefore we just reject it at that stage. I mean, if someone misses the deadline by, a minute or a couple of minutes, and if there are some extenuating circumstances, if their Wi-Fi died or if they were ill or something, then, we're lenient around the edges. But if someone doesn't submit it for, a couple of weeks or something, then it's too late. It's too late.
Yeah, even with the being a minute late, every college can do it differently. So there's no guarantee.
There's no guarantee.
So
just get it in on time.
If it's going to be a minute late, you might as well have been a minute early.
Pretty much.
And normally with job deadlines and internship deadlines and any kind of deadline after this one, if you miss it by a minute, it's not going to be considered.
That's right.
Just wanted to make that clear for anyone who's watching. So what kind of things do we ask for in the MyCapp?
Yeah, so the sorts of things that we ask for that are particularly helpful for us. It can include things like if someone's applying for a course at Cambridge, and there are, let's say, some different routes through that course. I mean, a sort of obvious example would be something like natural sciences. So people apply for natural sciences, but there are two main routes through that course. There's natural sciences physical and natural sciences biological. And from the UCAS application, we don't know whether people, at least at that early stage, are inclined to follow the physical course or the biological course. So that's what they can tell us in the relevant section of my Cambridge application. Similarly, for courses where there are various language options, so things like modern and medieval languages, they can tell us which languages they're interested in. So that's a sort of further level of detail that we couldn't get just through the UCAS application. So that's just one example. But there are some other things as well. So for instance, people are able to tell us whether their education has been disrupted by, particularly challenging circumstances. They may have mentioned that in the UCAS application, or maybe their school will have mentioned it in the school reference, which is part of the UCAS application. But nonetheless, it's just useful for us to make sure we've got detailed information about that kind of thing so that we can factor it into our decision making. Because as I've said on previous podcasts, what we're just trying to do really is make sure that the decisions we make are as fair as possible. And if we're assuming that someone has had no disruption to their education when that isn't actually the case, then our decision perhaps isn't fair, but it's just because we didn't have that information, and so we weren't able to guarantee that it was a well-considered decision.
Nice. And as well as all of those things, there's also another personal statement, I believe. And how is that different to the UCAS personal statement?
Yeah, so it differs in a couple of ways. It's a bit shorter. I think it's about 1,200 characters, but it might be worth double checking that. I think that's what I've got in my head, but I think that's right. So it's a bit shorter than the UCAS personal statement, because the UCAS personal statement is normally 4,000 characters. Yeah. And also, as people probably know, and they may have seen from one of our earlier podcasts, the personal statement on the UCAS application is changing a little bit this year, and we're recording this in 2025. Yeah. And it's now structured. It has these three sort of sections that we've discussed in some detail in an earlier podcast. The personal statement on the My Cambridge application form isn't structured in that way. It's just a sort of an open text box. So people don't have to use the same structure as they will have to use this year for the UCAS personal statement. They don't have to use that structure for this second personal statement. And it is an optional personal statement. And people sometimes, ask us about that, and they say, well, is it really optional? If I don't fill it in, am I at a disadvantage? And the honest answer is, no, it is optional. You're not at a disadvantage if you don't fill it in. But for certain courses, it can be particularly helpful if people do fill it in. So again, I sometimes think it's good to just look at maybe just one example just to sort of clarify what I mean there. So if someone's applying to Cambridge to study land economy, that would be a sort of classic example of this. They won't be applying to study land economy at the other universities on the UCAS application, because you can't study it at other universities. So it's highly likely they'll be studying things like, or applying to study things like economics, or possibly geography, or possibly law at other universities, and that's fine. So their UCAS personal statement should be focused on the subject that they're applying for at the majority of the universities. So it might be economics, might be law, might be geography. That's how they should handle the UCAS personal statement. Having done that, when they complete the My Cambridge application form, in the personal statement for that's when they can talk about land economy, and that's what they can tell us. They can tell us more about why that course appeals to them, basically. So for those sorts of cases, filling in the optional personal statement on the MyCapp form is really helpful. And we in for those sorts of subjects, we're used to seeing quite a difference between the UCAS personal statement and the MyCapp personal statement, but that's absolutely fine. That's what we're expecting.
Nice. So even if someone won't be disadvantaged by not filling out the optional personal statement in the MyCambridge application, I guess in a situation where someone is applying for law at 4 universities and land economy to Cambridge, to not fill out the optional personal statement, I guess could be seen as like a missed opportunity.
Yeah, it is an opportunity to tell us something else about your interest in the subject. I mean, and that's true even when people applying for the same subject at Cambridge as they are at other universities. So someone might be applying for history at all the universities on their UCAS list, and in those cases, again, they don't have to fill in the MyCapp personal statement because their UCAS personal statement would be absolutely fine for us. But it may be that they've undertaken some additional supercurricular activities and they didn't have space to mention all of that in their main UCAS personal statement. So why not tell us a little bit more about those things in the MyCapp personal statement? As I say, it's not obligatory, but it is an opportunity to just give us a little bit more information about your interest in the subject you've applied for. So it's worth thinking about whether there are a few things you might want to mention. And if you decide that there aren't, and that you've told us everything that we could ever want to know in the main UCAS personal statement, that's absolutely fine. It's not a problem.
Nice. I guess you could also, in the MyCapp, talk about specific things in the Cambridge course that you find interesting that you might not talk about in your main personal statement.
Absolutely, yeah. So if you know that in the first year, I mean, we tend to call them papers, but you can think of it really as being, let's say, a module or something like that. If you know that there's a module that really interests you for some sort of reason, or it doesn't have to just be in the first year, it might be in the second year of the course or the third year of the course, it's well worth saying something about that. It's nice to know that someone has thought really carefully about the course that they've applied for and that they understand how it's structured. So again, if you haven't really thought much about that, don't sort of just fabricate something for the sake of doing it. But if it's genuinely the case that one of the reasons why you're interested in studying that course is because eventually you'll be able to study this particular topic, it's worth writing just a few sentences about that. It shows that you've thought really carefully about your choices.
Nice. And so a common question that we get asked about the MyCambridge application and the personal statement are people applying for sciences, like applying for natural sciences. They ask if they're applying for, let's say, chemistry across all other universities, but natural sciences here, should their UCAS personal statement even slightly be take into account natural sciences, or should they fully talk about solely chemistry and then use the MyCapp to talk about the natural sciences courses as a whole?
I think the latter is best. I think if their UCAS, to take that example, if their UCAS personal statement is all about chemistry, that gives them the best possible opportunity to convince the other universities that they merit an offer.
Yeah.
And then they've got this separate opportunity to convince us that they understand how the natural sciences course works. So I think it would be much better to do it that way rather than to try and smuggle something about the natural sciences course into the UCAS personal statement, which has multiple audiences, not just a Cambridge audience.
Yeah, I guess I can imagine it be quite unnerving to write a personal statement solely on a specific course when assuming when natural sciences might be your priority, but we're just here to reassure that would be the best way to move forward.
Exactly.
And is for natural sciences again, is the MyCapp used for us to decide which strand of biological natural sciences or physical natural sciences someone is going to be interviewed? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so different colleges handle the interviews for natural sciences slightly differently. Some colleges will have one that focuses on one of the areas more, maybe like a sort of physics specific interview, and then maybe a sort of chemistry specific interview, whatever. Whereas others might have, 2 interviewers, one of whom is a physicist, one of whom is a chemist in the same interview. So, in essence, they'll cover the same sorts of things, but quite how they split it up might vary. So the information that we get from the MyCapp application about, the applicant's preferences can have an impact on the interviews that they receive. Yeah. Most colleges have a slightly different sort of interview stream for those who have expressed an interest in natural sciences, physical, as opposed to natural sciences, biological. And so without knowing what the applicant is interested in at that point, primarily, we wouldn't be able to sort of make sure that they were interviewed in an appropriate way. Yeah. I should say, though, that even though people can express an interest in, the physical route or the biological route for natural sciences in the MyCapp application, that doesn't set that in stone. So it doesn't mean then that for the next 3 years they're forced to follow that route. It's really just at the point of applying, which one do they think is most likely to appeal to them. But it's not uncommon that when students arrive here, they end up following a different route through the course. Maybe they said they wanted to follow the physical route, but then as they progress with the course, they become really interested in the kind of biological route. Yeah. So none of it is set in stone. They're not sort of like, pinning themselves down to that one option for the foreseeable future. It just helps us make that kind of, interview sort of allocation that I was talking about earlier.
Yeah, because everyone, once the admissions process is over, they're admitted to the natural sciences course.
Exactly.
It's just just one course.
Yep.
And I think the first year biology and cells course, you don't actually need biology A-level, so quite a lot of physicists, people coming from a physics background end up taking that course as well. Yep. So just one last question about interviews for natural sciences. So is it, if someone is applying and they're writing their Cambridge application and they're aware that within, whether it's bio-NatSci or phys-NatSci, that there's all of these different topics that could come up in their interview, but they know their strong and their strongest areas, or their areas that they really want to study in, might be in, I don't know, organic chemistry or applied mechanics. Is it worth them mentioning that those areas are their favorite areas in the MyCapp, or would it not have much impact?
I think it's well worth doing that. Yeah. I mean, I think what we're just trying to do is get a genuine insight into what people are interested in at this relatively early stage of their sort of academic career, their sort of journey through university. And so I think anyone who's applying who is particularly interested in a particular area of science, they should tell us that, and as ever, give us a little bit of evidence, if you like, as to how they've explored that interest. If they've done some reading, if they've watched some YouTube videos, whatever it may be, and listened to some podcasts or wide range of things. Just tell us a little bit about that. The applicant may be asked some questions about it in one of the interviews, but even if they're not asked questions explicitly about it in the interviews, it helps us form a more detailed picture of their intellectual interests, and that hopefully helps us make good decisions about the people to whom we make the offers.
I think there's the last box in the MyCambridge application, which we can put a link in the caption, so that you can see the form from beginning to end, so you can have a look through the PDF without actually starting application, just to see what questions you'll have to go through. But right at the end, there's a tell us anything else box, which I think kind of sums up the MyCapp, is in that it's there for you to share anything that you think will be useful for the college and university to know, so that afterwards you're rest assured that they know everything that
that's right.
That you think that would be useful for them to know.
And with that box, it's not a trick question.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not
yeah.
like there are some right answers.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It really is just, is there anything else you'd like us to know? We've asked you questions that hopefully enable you to give us useful information, but there may be things you haven't had the opportunity to tell us. So please just tell us. But it's not a trick question, and you don't have to mention X, Y, and Z in order to stand, a better chance of receiving an offer. It really is just an invitation to tell us anything you haven't had a chance to.
No, yeah, exactly. And I think if you're doubting on whether, they can probably work this out, or even though it's not been said explicitly, or you think you're worried about sounding repetitive, I think it's best to just get it on paper so that we know, because you don't want to be in a position where you're having to communicate something that's further down the process that would have been useful to have known at the beginning.
Exactly.
And the last question we have is, how is the MyCapp and the UCAS personal statement, are they marked or assessed? How do we use them?
We just use them as sources of information. Okay. So we don't mark formally either the UCAS personal statement or the MyCapp personal statement. We don't mark them out of 10 and then rank order people based on those. They're simply sources of information. So they're not sort of formally assessed, but they are part of the range of things that we look at when we're making our decisions. And as I've already indicated, I guess, both of those personal statements might trigger some questions in some of the interviews. So they may well be used as part of the process in that way. But no, they're not sort of marked, and people aren't formally ranked on them.
Nice. So I think that's everything, unless there was anything else.
I think just about the logistics of filling in the My Cambridge application form. So I think in the sort of description we'll put the link to the PDF that we've been talking about, and that's a PDF that gives people the chance to sort of see the questions that are on this particular form. You don't fill in the PDF. It's just there so that you know what to expect, and so that you can gather together the bits of information you need, like if you need to upload your high school transcript, as some people will need to, to make sure you've got that to hand. But the way it works logistically in terms of actually filling in the form, when you submit your UCAS application, you'll be sent a link to the My Cambridge application form by the college that's processing your application. And that's the link that you use to fill in the actual forms. Then you click that link, you fill it in online, you can fill in part of it and then save that, and then go back to it, fill in another part and save that. So you don't have to do it all at one sitting. You can save it and do it over a period of days. But yeah, that's the actual form that you fill in, and you won't get that link until after you've submitted your UCAS application. So in other words, you can't simultaneously fill in the UCAS application and the My Cambridge application and submit them together. You have to do the UCAS one, and that will trigger the link to the other one. So I hope that's clear. Just worth mentioning in case people start trying to fill in the PDF and then realize they have to do it all again.
Exactly. And people can obviously drafts their MyCapp well before they submit, and their personal statement.
So then they just sort of cut and paste it into the actual one. Exactly.
You probably should definitely do that.
That would be good. Starting from scratch. That's good advice.
Well, I think that's everything. Thanks, Marcus, for a really useful podcast on the My Cambridge application. If there's any questions that viewers have, please put them on the comments and we can get around to them. And if you have any suggestions for podcasts for us to do in the future, do suggest them in the comments. We've made playlists for all of our podcasts now on YouTube. One of them is a playlist on admissions advice, where it contains all of our podcasts around the admissions process. Another separate playlist, which is also admissions advice, but specifically the Cambridge interviews, where there's a lot of general advice for interviews, but also subject-specific advice. From memory, I think the other playlist is Life at Cambridge and subject-specific podcasts, where you can find a lot of podcasts that we've done going through each of the courses, whether that's interviewing an academic or a current student. So do check those out. We're going to be recording more podcasts on the admissions process, and interviewing academics. So have a look out, and we'll see you guys next time. I'm going to get coffee now.
It's too late now.
My plan was I'd run on a journey for this.